LI that is basically an example of what we want these things to look like. And I did this with one that's visible all the time, so I didn't have to keep typing something into the form before I style it. I have something visible to do. So now let's make a copy of it each time. And I suppose we should get rid of the fake name. I mean, it's a real movie, but barely. Okay, so render list item is what's going to be different. Instead of creating an LI from scratch, we're going to grab one off the page and clone it. It's going to be the same one every time. As you might guess, I kind of like the idea of passing in the selector that identifies that element up front. So we want all of our flicks to have this flick class on them. How about this one that we're going to use as an example? We'll also throw the class template on it so we can find it. If they all have that class flick, and I just grab one with the, yeah, anyway, I like this idea. So I'm going to say template selector. And the selector I'll use, I think, .flick.template. So that would match any element that has both of those classes on it. And then, as you might guess, I'm going to store that element on my object, on my app object. So something like this. I've got my list. Now I've got my template. This.template equals document.querySelector. I'm already passing in all those selectors. So I've got this selectors object. Say selectors.template selector. Like that. And now it's there. So if I want to copy it, this.template should now have that. Instead of document.createElement, I'm going to grab that template, which should now just be stored in this.template. And there's a built-in DOM method called cloneNode, which just makes a copy of things. Let's see what happens if I do that, if I don't change anything else. Well, it keeps adding them, but my buttons went away. I could demonstrate looking this up in the documentation. I ordinarily would, but we're running out of time. But it turns out cloneNode takes an argument. It's a Boolean, true or false, defaults to false, whether it should copy all the children of that node or just the node itself. So it's leaving all the buttons and the span and everything out, unless I say true. So cloneNode true. I think if I just cloneNode parentheses, no, it doesn't do it. Oh yeah, it has an argument called deep, whether it's a deep copy, and we want a deep copy. So now if we do it, and did I refresh the page? What did I do? That is saved. Oh, well, I just set the text content. So I overwrote all the contents. But I just want to actually put the name inside this little span here, right? Flick name. Right? That's where I want the name to go. If I set text content, we learned the other day, that's going to blow away whatever is in there already. So instead of doing that, I need to grab this span and set the text content of that. Well, just like you can use query selector on document, you can use it on a specific node too to search just within that element. In other words, document.querySelector flick name might get us lots of them. But if I say item.querySelector look for the class flick name. Then I've only got the one that's inside this one. And then it's the text content of that span whose text content I want to change. See what I'm doing there? I make a copy of that template. I go ahead and set that data attribute. Then I look inside that LI for something with a class of flick name, and I set the text content of just that LI. Then I return the item. Let's see how that does. Now each one has a button, has buttons. Cool. But I've still got this blank one that shows up every time, right? It's got that template class on it. So what I could do is in the CSS, just look for something with a class of template and say display none. So display can have values like block, inline block, flex we used the other day. There's also none. It'll still be in the DOM, it's just not going to show up. And there's not going to be any space left for it. Now what happens? None of them show up. I can see them being added over here. Why? Because they all have the template class on them, right? So after I make a copy of it, I need to take that template class off. This used to be a pain in the neck. It's not a pain in the neck anymore. Now, I can always get to the class list of an element with .ClassList. Hey, here's a really cool developer tool trick. When I have an element selected, see where it says $0 here? Use $0 in the console to refer to this element, whichever one's highlighted. So right now, if I go to the console, say $0, look, I've got that LI. $0.classList. Sure enough, gives me all the classes on it. Template, flick, grid X, align middle. And there is the classList.remove. So I could remove the template class, and now it's not invisible anymore. So when I render the list item, first thing I'm going to do, item.ClassList.remove template. So now the copies will not have the template class. I know we're kind of flying this afternoon. I want to get to a point where we can assign some good homework. Refresh the page. Yep. Now each one has their own buttons, and if you need to add another button to each of these, all you have to do is go back to the HTML and add it here. You don't have to do document.createElement.button and add classes to it and all that stuff. Piece of cake. To not display the first one? So I put a CSS rule that looks for anything with a class of template and set display none. So then I made sure I removed it from the others so they didn't also display none. Cool. So now clone the template. What was my last commit? Yeah. Clone the template when adding a flick.